Have you ever tried to find God and ended up more lost than before? You search online and there are 1,000 voices. You walk into a church and they tell you, this is the truth. Then another church says the opposite and calls it the truth too. One says grace is everything. Another says obedience is everything. One baptizes babies, one doesn't. Some say tongues prove your faith. Others say tongues are deception. And all of them claim to follow Jesus. You wanted to find God. But now you're standing in a forest of doctrines. And every tree claims to be the way. It's overwhelming. And if you're honest, maybe you've started wondering, where is God in all of this? Let's slow down and go back. Not back to the church, not back to theology, but back to the very first voice. Because here's something you may not have considered. Every denomination started with a person reading scripture, interpreting it, and saying, this is what God meant. Others believed him. They followed. A church was formed, and it became a system, a tradition, a structure. Then someone else read the same Bible, but saw something different. And they said, no, this is what God meant. Another movement, another church, another truth. So when you choose a denomination, you're not necessarily choosing Jesus. You might just be choosing someone's interpretation of him. But Jesus knew this would happen, and he warned us not to let human voices take his place. He asked you to follow him. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. John 10:27. But how do you hear his voice if it's drowned out by all the others? You start by reading his words, not what others say about him, not their sermons, not their systems, just his teachings, his citations, his voice. Start with the Gospels. Let his way of speaking shape your understanding of God. Let his Spirit tune your heart. But even when you read his words, you'll notice something surprising. Jesus didn't always speak plainly. He often spoke in symbols, in stories, in parables, and he told us why. His disciples once asked him directly, why do you speak to them in parables? Matthew 13:10. And Jesus replied, to you it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. Matthew 13:11. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. Matthew 13:13. Jesus spoke in spiritual language, not just to hide truth, but to awaken those who truly seek it. Because truth is not always sitting on the surface. Sometimes it requires depth, not just intellect, but spirit. And that's where many interpretations come from. Different minds, different cultures, different hearts, all reading the same symbols, but arriving at different conclusions. But Jesus never said, believe this exact explanation. He said, the Spirit of truth will guide you into all truth. John 16:13. So don't just read his words. Learn to think like he thought, feel like he felt. Let his Spirit guide you through his meaning. We need to know where his words are found. The Bible as we know it today contains 66 books. Only a few of them record the spoken words of Jesus himself. And those are found in 4 main books: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. These are called the Gospels, and they were written by the disciples or their companions, men who either walked with Jesus or gathered eyewitness accounts. But even here, you should know, not all gospel writers were direct witnesses. Luke, for example, was a companion of Paul. He tells us he investigated everything, but he wasn't there when Jesus spoke. And from the book of Acts onward, from Romans to Revelation, you're no longer reading the teachings of Jesus, but the reflections, experiences, and interpretations of men trying to explain him. I'm not saying these books are false. I believe Jesus can be seen in every person, in every voice, in every book. The Spirit of God is not limited, but I also believe this. We must learn to discern, to separate what comes directly from Jesus from what is human interpretation about him. Because confusion didn't begin with Jesus. It began after Jesus, with churches forming, doctrines developing, letters becoming law. If you want to know what Jesus truly said, start with his words. Read his voice in the Gospels. Then, yes, explore the rest, even the Old Testament. Because Jesus didn't appear from nowhere. He fulfilled what came before.
Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Matthew 5:17. The ancient writings can help you understand his context, his mission, his depth, but always read with this in mind. Not everything in the Bible is Jesus, but everything in the Bible points toward him, if you know how to look. And that is why we must walk closely with his Spirit. So we don't just read about God, we actually find him. Because here's the truth. Jesus is not divided. He never wanted thousands of denominations. That they all may be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you. John 17:21. He wanted oneness, not organizational unity, but spiritual harmony. So how do you find God? You listen. Not to everyone who speaks in his name, but to the one who is the Word made flesh. You search, not for a label to wear, but for a voice to follow. You walk, maybe alone at first, maybe misunderstood, but you walk in light with him. This is what I've come to believe. It's not doctrine. It's not complete. It's just the result of my search. And now, it's your turn. Ask, read, test everything. Learn to recognize what comes from God and what comes from man. Because if you truly want to find God, you must begin where truth begins, with Jesus, and Jesus alone. Your journey to God is yours alone. Start with the words of Jesus.